Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 16th, 2022 Community Formation Commission meeting. We'll call it to order at 5:39 p.m. Sam, can we do a roll call, please?
Sure. 1 second. Commissioner Adam Alican. Commissioner Alonso.
Here.
Commissioner Chavez.
Present.
Chair Escobedo.
Here.
Commissioner Kim Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Rachel Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Killebrew.
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Present.
Commissioner Sander.
Here.
Commissioner Wood.
Here.
Vice Chair Zepeda. And Commissioner Reynaud. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Sam. And now we'll move on to public comment for items that are not on today's agenda. Sam, do we have anyone from the public that would like to give public comment for items that are not on today's agenda?
Just 1 second. If there's anyone in the public that would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand. If there's anyone in the public that would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please click on the hand raise feature in the Zoom platform. There are no hands raised, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. And with that, we'll go to our administrative agenda. And 4A is announcements. The only announcement that I have is yesterday, Rachel, Anna, and I gave a presentation to City Council on just an update on where we're at in the process and where we will be going. And it was a good opportunity to get the word out about the public outreach effort. So it was a quick presentation at the beginning of the meeting. If you want to take a look at it, it's online. And any other announcements from the commission? Doesn't seem like it. So we'll close out that and we'll go to 4B, which is consideration and action on the draft Community Formation Commission meeting minutes for February 9th, 2022. Any changes to the meeting minutes?
I move to approve.
A motion from Christian. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Louisa. And any discussion? I'm not seeing any. So Sam, can we do a roll call vote, please?
Yeah, let me just open it up to the public.
Oh, yeah.
If there's anyone in the public that would like to speak on item 4B, consideration and action on the draft CFC meeting minutes for February 9th, please raise your hand. If there's anyone that would like to speak on item 4B, the draft meeting minutes for February 9th, please click on the hand raise feature. There are no hands raised. So Commissioner Adam Lincoln, Commissioner Alonso.
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez.
Yes.
Chair Escobedo.
Yes.
Commissioner Kim Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Rachel Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Killebrew.
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Yes.
Commissioner Sander.
Yes.
Commissioner Wood.
Yes.
Vice Chair Zepeda.
Yes.
And Commissioner Reynaud. The motion passes.
Thank you, Sam. So we'll close out the administrative agenda and move on to item 5, review of outreach materials. The CFC will review the survey and focus group materials that have been developed with support from the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement and the Center for Court Innovation, CCI. This is our only item today, so we're hoping to get through and finished within an hour. It's been a long way here, but I'd like to thank the survey / focus group working group, which is Lizzie, Rachel, Louisa. You all did an excellent job and I'm excited to review it. Cami, I don't know if you're able to pull up the document. I'm having trouble on my end.
Yes.
Tammy, I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen if needed.
So to set the stage for the survey, we, in development of the survey, which started back in, and Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, it was October or November is when we started working on the survey. And in the process of developing the survey, we consulted with Dr. Jill Sharkey, I believe someone else from SBCC, and also multiple research experts from the Center for Court Innovation. So it's been thoroughly vetted. It's to this point to make sure that questions aren't leading, to make sure that we will get the information that we're looking for out of the survey. And it was a really thoughtful process from the whole group. If anyone else from the group wants to add anything, Rachel.
Sorry, I just want to say, I don't think this is the right draft.
No, that's correct. That's not the right one.
This is
That's
not,
the old one.
This is the very, very old draft.
Hold on.
I was going to say that didn't look quite right.
I was like,
Okay, let me,
that's not what we were sent.
okay, hold on just a second. Sorry about that.
And I apologize for not bringing that up sooner.
This one will work much better.
Hi, Louis. Welcome.
Okay. Here you go.
All right. So the goal is to go through the survey questions. Again, we're hoping that there's not any large edits because we want to take this out to the public, and we think the questions have been thoroughly vetted by research professionals. But if you do have feedback, now's the time to give it. We will have, we're going to get this translated. It's going to be given out through SurveyMonkey. So you all will have links that you can send out to your networks. And we're also going to have paper copies. So if technology is a barrier, we will have paper copies that we'll be able to give out. And then we'll have someone enter them in manually so that we can collect data. Rachel or Lizzie, Louisa, anything to add before we go through the questions? All right, not seeing anything. Cool. So I'll go through and just kind of read the questions, and then I'm going to lean on the full work group and Cami to try and answer any questions that are out there. So Cami, if we could go down to the first question, please. So we broke them up into sections. This first section is general knowledge and perceptions. Actually, if we want to go back to the top, I'm sorry, because this is kind of important. So we wanted to provide some general information, and this was Elise's feedback when she designed the first draft of this, is trying to pick out some key points for people so that if they happen to not read the full recommendation, since it is a lot longer and maybe not as accessible for many, that we could distill it down to maybe the key points. And these are the two areas that were highlighted for to give people enough context to be able to answer the questions just from these bullet points. Obviously, they're not going to be able to get the full context, but if they want, there will be a link on the survey for them to access the full recommendation. But this is just a general summary, and I'm not sure if anyone got to read it and had any feedback or questions about this, but that's the purpose behind the recommendation summary. Kim?
Oh, I was, one possible idea is in that sentence where it says the oversight board will be made up of 11 people. I wonder if we need to signal to folks that, you know, there'll be people from the community, or that they'll be elected or chosen, like just using some language so they have a little bit of a sense that it'll be like of the community, for the community.
Would something like appointed be?
Something like appointed community members.
Yeah, that could be good. Just so they have a sense of the fairness and inclusion.
Maybe include appointed by city council.
That was my exact comment that I wanted to share, just so that it's clear.
Thank you for that feedback. Any other comments on these bullet points, the recommendation summary? All right, I'm not seeing any. So we'll move down to the first section, which is general knowledge and perception. So Rachel, can you, I think I missed one of the important meetings when we were discussing this, Rachel or Lizzie or Louisa, on kind of what we're trying to pull out of these questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it was we had discussed as a whole commission and as a working group really early on that we didn't have the capacity and the time to do a full kind of community climate survey, like in terms of how do people, you know, how do folks feel about policing? How do folks feel about oversight in general? So we wanted some section to kind of get a baseline of people's perception. So some of it's just kind of, you know, a couple questions to get at how people perceive the SVPD. And then also kind of getting a sense in this first section of how well folks self-identify as like how much they understand about what we've told them, like kind of the introductory piece. Because as Gabe mentioned before, like we would love for folks to read the whole you know, draft recommendations, but the idea with a survey as well is that you are probably going to get lots of folks that don't. So that's kind of a bit of the background. Lizzie?
Yeah, it was also in one of the purpose statements is that we wanted that the oversight body would increase trust and transparency, and a way to kind of measure if that would actually be true is to measure where trust and transparency is now.
So the first question reads, I believe the Santa Barbara Police Department is transparent about its existing internal investigation process. And it goes from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and then a additional option that says, I don't know much about the internal investigation process. Any feedback on this question? Chief Melekian?
Just a question. I noticed in the draft that you originally put up before they decided that it was an outdated version, that the first question was really about a perception question about how people felt about the police department in general. And I'm wondering why that would be eliminated. I understand these process questions about the internal investigation process, although I suspect that many people really don't know very much about it, but they may have very well have a perception about it, and that's fine. I'm just curious why that overarching question was eliminated.
Rachel, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question, and we initially did want to do that, but I mean, this was probably at least 6 months ago or so, as the first working groups were talking about the kinds of data and the things we'd like to know, realized that a full climate survey, like, you know, the perceptions of the community, is a really massive endeavor that would require a lot of rigor as a survey to really be meaningful, right? Like, it almost have to be like random sampling and a lot of work from an outside consultant to make a survey like that, you know, for people to have confidence in the actual data analysis of a full climate survey, because you need to have random sampling and like specific, you know, representation across a population. So we recognize that that was outside of our purview, but also, you know, our capacity, and that maybe the oversight body might eventually do something like a full-scale climate survey of the community. But also it was kind of, we just recognized that the fact that the commission was in place, like that the CFC was created and appointed, you know, was enough to say at some level, the community has already said it's interested in this process. So it's kind of a combination of that, like a capacity issue and just, you know, what is our purview as this body versus the eventual oversight body, and the Office of Police Oversight.
I'll let it go. It's not, I don't want to interfere with this process, but I do think that when we talk about fitting a model to this community and this police department, I think that would have been a question of some value. Just my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. Dama?
Yeah, just I agree with what Chief Miller, like you said, as far as just a general sense of just the attitude towards, I don't think it needs to be very like detailed, just any broad sense, just because I also think it informs other questions that we had last week, you know, about we're debating, you know, how strong the language of the proposal should go towards like accountability and discipline. But like, I would like to see the results of a question like that first, because, you know, if the general, I think it should be tailor-made to the community. And, you know, if there's a general sense that things are okay, then, you know, then I could understand like maybe not going as like an extreme to trying to get language, as opposed to if there was a big issue. So I think just a general sense, just kind of it makes kind of helps the sense of debate and to see where we are and what we should fight for and how far we should fight for certain things based on how the community feels and where they're at. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Lizzie?
So I think it'd be good to keep in mind that as we go through this document, there are a lot of potential questions that would be insightful and interesting and compelling. And the group really kind of grappled with which questions were absolutely we wanted to include. I'm interested in that question as well. And I also see where some of that information could be received through some of these other questions. But if we included all the questions that we thought had high value, this would be an hour-long survey. So we were trying to be very, you know, streamlined and see if other questions would answer the big question. And but I'm also open to you know, to adding that question in if other commissioners felt that we should.
Serafina?
I also just wanted to remind everyone that a part of the next commission or the board that we're making, part of their duties are to conduct community climate surveys. So that's already something that will happen. And maybe that's something that we can leave a note or directions for the board and say, you know, these were really great questions that we wanted to ask. We just didn't feel it was in our purview to ask them. So again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't include it. I want to think a little bit more about that for that specific question. But just keep in mind that these questions will eventually be asked to the survey. It's just not in our survey at the moment.
Thank you, Serafina. Jordan?
Yeah, perhaps a compromise for the time being, since we're just right at the first question, is to hold this question until after we go through the rest of the survey, and then see at the end if it's still needed. That's just my suggestion. My 2 cents.
I like that solution. Lieutenant Hill?
Yeah, I apologize to add on additional comment, and I just want to say and recognize that I really appreciate the conversation that's going into these questions. It's much appreciated. The only thing I would comment on this question was that I do understand the word process is in here, but California law significantly restricts our ability to be transparent about a lot of things about internal affairs investigations, and I'm not sure that that's well understood. So there would probably be a significant amount of more transparency regarding that entire kind of process if the law did allow. So we are often, in fact, most often, very restricted by the law. And that might be lost a little bit in this question, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak on it.
Thank you. So do we feel okay with going through the survey one time through? And Rachel, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add quickly too, because I mean, this, if we have questions on individual questions going forward as well, just we can also kind of point out, because I think that first question was one where this happened, where this is also why we were really grateful to have consultants like CCI. So in that first iteration, the reason some of those questions actually got scrapped is that our consultants, we had conversations about whether or not certain language would lead folks in a certain direction or imply a perception. So the way that one was written initially was also something where we said, does this sound like we're implying that the perception is not safe and not trustworthy? So there were definitely a lot of times where the CCI recommended certain changes in certain language so that we avoided anything that would be perceived as leading folks when they answered the questions as well. So just maybe if the working group, we can kind of point those out too at times where maybe if it's a question of language, because a lot of things were changed with our own kind of focus on transparency and trying to remain neutral in our language in the survey too.
Thank you for that. So we'll move on to question 2, and maybe we'll go through each of these questions and then go back and commissioners can request to revisit specific questions. All right, so question 2, I trust the outcomes of the Santa Barbara Police Department's current internal investigation process, and same options, strongly disagree to strongly agree. An additional option for I don't know much about the Santa Barbara Police Department internal investigation process. And then question 3, I understand the roles of the Civilian Oversight Board and the Office of Police Oversight as described above. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. Again, referring to the summary of the recommendation. And then after the general knowledge and perceptions, we move on to more specific recommendations or more specific language from our recommendations. And it is, so I'll read the statement out loud. It is a Santa Barbara city policy that current city employees, including those of the Santa Barbara Police Department, are ineligible to serve on any city board, including the Civilian Oversight Board. One additional recommendation is that people who are currently employed in law enforcement in another jurisdiction or were formerly employed in law enforcement in any jurisdiction also be ineligible to serve on the COB. So this is, again, remember, we're trying to also pick out the points that we had a lot of discussion about, this being one. And the 4th question is, do you think people with prior law enforcement experience should be eligible to serve on the COB? Yes, is one option. Yes, but only after they have been out of law enforcement for a number of years. And if they choose that option, they'll be able to choose how many years they think that would be appropriate. no, and then not sure. And then question 5 is, do you think immediate family members of current Santa Barbara Police Department employees should be eligible to serve on the Civilian Oversight Board? Yes, no, not sure. After this, it goes to complaints of alleged Santa Barbara Police Department misconduct. And currently, complaints can be filed with SBPD or with the Santa Barbara City Clerk's Office. One of the draft recommendations is that the Office of Police Oversight also be able to receive complaints. Please indicate how you feel about the following statements from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And number 7 is having an office in Office of Police Oversight that can both receive and monitor complaints about alleged Santa Barbara Police Department misconduct and make public reports would increase my trust in the complaint process. Strongly disagree to strongly agree, and an additional option that says I'm unfamiliar with the complaint review process. Question 8 is having an office that can both receive and monitor complaints about alleged Santa Barbara Police Department misconduct and make public reports would increase the transparency of the complaint process. Strongly disagree to strongly agree, with an additional option, I'm unfamiliar with the complaint review process. The next one points to the community involvement portion of the recommendation. The community will be engaged in the proposed oversight process through direct presence on the Civilian Oversight Board, through ongoing community outreach and regular reporting on such things as crime statistics, Santa Barbara Police Department policies and procedures, and data related to complaints. Please indicate how you feel about the following statements from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Question 9 is, if Santa Barbara had a civilian oversight process like the one described above, my trust in policing in my community would increase. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. Question 10 is, if Santa Barbara had a civilian oversight process like the one described above, my belief in the transparency of the Santa Barbara Police Department would increase. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. Question 11, if you can scroll down, Cami. If Santa Barbara had a civilian oversight process like the one described above, it would increase the Santa Barbara Police Department's accountability to the community. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. And again, many of these questions refer to language directly from the recommendation, and oftentimes from the purpose statement, as Lizzie mentioned earlier. And then the next one talks about compensation. So we wanted to get some feedback about compensation. And question 12 points to members of the Civilian Oversight Board should receive a stipend for participation. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. And then question 13 goes to the specifics of what that compensation could be and what it looks like in the recommendation. It's almost verbatim, the language from the recommendation. And it goes strongly disagree to strongly agree. Additional recommendations. So the way that this portion is going to work is there's going to be parts of the recommendation, and people are either going to be able to choose from 3 options. It's going to be agree, disagree, and unsure. And it'll all be in one section, kind of like a matrix, and they'll be able to choose which option that they want. So 14, the recommendation, the members of the Civilian Oversight Board should represent the diversity of the Santa Barbara community. Question 15 is the Civilian Oversight Board should conduct regular community surveys related to public perceptions and understanding of police investigations and report those survey results to the community. The Office of Police Oversight should be able to accept complaints of alleged Santa Barbara Police Department misconduct directly and anonymously. And individuals with previous law enforcement experience should be allowed to serve as a director of police oversight. And then 18, is there anything else you would like to share with the commission? And it'll be an open text box. And so for the bulk of our survey, that's going to be much of the information. And then at the end of the survey, there will be an optional portion where they can give us demographic information, which includes the neighborhood that they live in the city of Santa Barbara, but also the greater South Coast Santa Barbara County. And then anything from primary language spoken at home, age, the gender that they identify as, and more demographic information that again will all be optional. But if people fill it out, it'll give us a good indication because CCI is going to send us results every few days, pretty frequently, so that we'll have a good sense of where we need to do some more public outreach. And again, that's if we get this optional information. So anyone from the focus / survey group want to add anything before we take commissioner questions? Louisa?
Yeah, I just want to remind, thank you, Gabe, for introducing all the questions and for all the comments and thoughtful conversation we are going to have. I just want to remind everyone before we get into too deep of a conversation about wordsmithing everything, that part of our job is to make sure that the readability of this survey is at a 9th, 10th grade level so that people can have access to it. So just to keep that in mind before we really start getting into everything. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder. Other comments from the work group before we open it up to commissioners? All right. Anyone from the commission want to go back to any specific question? And if not, we'll kind of go piece by piece. All right, so we'll go back to the first section, which is general knowledge and perceptions. And I know there was a lot of conversation around that first question. Did anyone want to comment further on the first question? What about any of the questions in this section?
For question 3, just curious about, because this question focuses on whether or not they understand what was just, above. And I know you all were like hyper focused on what you included and didn't include. And I was just wondering why this made the cut and what we're really going to get from this question.
I mean, I can answer a little bit of that. I mean, from our conversations with CCI, this is a pretty standard type of question that you would include, especially when it's a survey that is, has to make the assumption that there's actually a lot more information that the folks taking it might not fully have a chance to absorb. And I think what it is just, it'll help us kind of understand the way we've presented information, but also, right, like if we get a lot on one end of that spectrum or the other, it also can help us it can help CCI disaggregate in a certain way. So if we saw one particular trend related to one of these sections or a particular answer, and we were like, oh, that seems odd to us, they could disaggregate the data for us and say, well, actually, like of that group that answered this question, 99% of that group also said they really agreed with the fact that they understood. So like, right, it would allow us to give some nuance to the weight of certain answers, the way people self-identify as like, I really understood it or I really didn't.
Thanks. It makes sense.
Jordan?
Yeah, my only comment is it just in the grouping, it just seems, we're talking about the police in the first 2 questions, and the third question is there's just one question about police civilian oversight and Office of Police Oversight. So wondering why not just move that to the next section, but that's just a different formatting type of thing. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for that. Dama?
Yes, thank you. With regard to question 2, as was sort of hinted at before, I just feel that, I trust the outcome of the internal investigation process. I just don't think enough people know enough about the process or how it works to really comment on that. And I think it's going to end up just reflecting their general attitude or belief towards the police department in general. So I thought maybe just like ask the question of what they think in general. If there's a way to frame that, that could be documented accurately and doesn't have any issues that were mentioned before, as far as, you know, how you can parse the data, I guess.
Thank you for that. I'm taking notes. And if anyone from the work group or Cami.
Yeah, I wanted to comment because that came up in our conversations quite a bit when we were talking about this. And I think that it's really important to know, if they don't know anything about the internal investigation process, that in itself is an answer. And to be able to compare that with the answers that follow, I think are also going to be of help to the work that comes after the survey is done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lieutenant Hill.
Thank you, Chair. And this is similar in context to Commissioner Adam Malikam's comment. I just thought, and I don't need a response, I appreciate it, but I just want to make a comment that it may be helpful if you're asking this question about trusting the outcomes to ask a secondary question about whether they've actually ever been a participant in the process. That way you can at least delineate whether someone's speaking from personal experience or just general perception. Thank you.
Thank you. Lizzie?
I think I'm just trying to understand, I think I'm trying to understand the concern of this question. Are we thinking, because there's the answer, I don't know much about the internal investigation process. So are we thinking that that folks won't choose that rather they would just choose like an impression of what they like? Even if they don't know much about it, they would say disagree because of their feeling, their attitude towards PD or police. Is that what our concern is?
Well, there's not like a standard of what, we're not defining what it means to know about the process. So everyone has their own relative interpretation of what it means to know about the process. Like, is it somebody whose parents are in the police? Is it somebody like, I mean, I might think I know about the process, but maybe I don't. So there's a lot of, in those kind of surveys, there's a whole study of how people think they know more than they do. I don't know what it's called, but there's a whole the psychologists will probably know what it is, but people tend to answer questions like that, especially if they have strong opinions about it. They'll think they know more than they do. So they might not think they don't know much. They might think they actually know a lot when they don't. So it's hard to measure all that stuff and to be sure of what the information comes out at the end, if it means much, you know. So.
Thank you for that, Damo. John? John, I see your hand raised.
Sorry about that. I don't know why I'm having problems with my computer. 1 second. I do want to speak to an issue, and maybe Sam, I don't have the ability to screen share. I'd like to do that. So I just want to comment overall on the survey. I recognize the hard work put in there, and I think there's a lot of good questions, a lot of good category. This is a little bit outside my lane for what I've always really strived to do and serve this commission. So I want to acknowledge that from the start with, because my goal is to procedurally keep us on task from Brown Act is number one. And number two, if there are any questions in terms of city laws or state or federal laws when it comes to the issues that we are tackling, I want to present that and be transparent and work with the commission. In terms of policy, opinion, everything else, I do feel that is not my role, and so I've been very careful. But I do at least want to offer, some opinions to help the commission, and take commission. Feel free to take it for what it's worth. If you look at some of the questions, it's kind of talking in terms of what Commissioner Adam Malikan said in terms of there may not be knowledge on certain areas. And I thought that was really insightful. And so when you have some questions like, I'm really focusing, I know we're on 3, so this is my only comment going to be for tonight, but 7 through 11, when we talk about that, an opponent of oversight could argue that the survey is skewed because they're leading questions, right? It's like, well, sure, having a commission would be better for transparency. Why not? It's something extra. It's not a detraction. I'll support it, right? So you kind of want to avoid that part. And so I was kind of trying to help the commission. If I can share my screen for a second, I saw the city of Santa Ana did a survey, and I apologize if my Sam, am I able to share the screen for the commission? Okay. Let me get to that right now.
I made you a co-host, John, so you should be able to share your screen if needed.
Thank you. Let me know if it's up. I think at least they have some similarities with your survey, which is great. There's some interesting things as well. Is my screen up?
Yes, it's the City of Santa Ana Oversight.
Thank you.
Feedback.
Yeah, so you go on Google, required is one question at the bottom. So I put in, I'm a Santa Ana resident, right? A business owner, contractor, vendor, employee, right? So next part, it gets into what neighborhood you live. I at least thought that was good because, we want to hear, maybe there's a certain district, I think council members want to hear that too. Maybe there's a certain district that feels they're not being served, right? Or underrepresented or dealing with the police. And I think the police department wants to know that as well. I think that at least that's key in terms of knowing the survey of what area or of the city of Santa Barbara a person may be in there, right? We go into the third, and here, like I said, this is a question I think we similarly have. The city of Santa Ana should establish a civilian police oversight mechanism. To what extent do you agree with this statement, right? That's really good. And then it talks about, instead of leading, it's like, what are the powers, right? What do you sort of investigate? What do you think is important? And it lists things on there. How many members should be on there? Instead of saying, do you think be on there? Terms. In terms of qualifications, right? What are the most important, right? You see here, a key must not have a family member. So similar issues that you're addressing in your survey. And please, any other comments? Now, this is a shorter one. Obviously, you can expand, but it's interesting how it's phrasing, and it's interesting how it's giving people at least more of an option list versus what are the qualities. And like I said, I think our survey is really good as well. I just have a little concern, at least if a proponent's going to be like, well, the way 7-11 are phrased, it could be skewed to say, to determine a certain outcome on that. And that's my only comment, suggestion, humbly to say, and thank you for at least allowing me to bring that point. I'll stop sharing my screen 1 second. Sorry, I do multiple computers and it always ends up. Sam, if you can just turn me off. It's probably easier until I figure all this out. I apologize.
Thank you, John, for that. I'll just speak from my personal perspective. Is I appreciate that, and I'm looking at the survey now. But questions like, should we establish a civilian oversight mechanism? I think we're past that point, and we're well in the process of setting it up. Some of these other questions, I find them interesting, but I guess I'd like to hear from the commission on how you all feel about the questions that we have in this survey currently. Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to, I guess, further underscore that point as well, because I sort of feel like, I agree that we're beyond that question, right? I mean, if we needed to ask the community the question, do you think civilian oversight should even be considered? That's a question the city council should have or would have asked before they even created the formation commission, right? So that's also why the conversations that we've been having, we have to assume that the answer to that question, as far as the city council is concerned, is already a yes. So that's also why, it kind of didn't make it into, I guess, the iteration of our survey that we have at this point. Because again, that's going back to a climate survey around police oversight in general that we kind of had to accept was outside our purview as the already appointed Community Formation Commission. And then I am interested to kind of maybe revisit some of John's comments when we go look at 7 and 11 in a little bit, just because I feel like those questions specifically were ones that we discussed with CCI, specifically in that they are not leading. And we actually worked kind of through those issues with those, but maybe it's easier. We'll just wait until we actually have those up on screen as well.
Thank you, Rachel. Lizzie?
I think it would be fair to share with the commission and the public that we had that conversation in our work group. The question did come up, should we ask this question? I think it was brought up maybe a couple of times in this particular work group. And the majority of that work group felt, as was discussed, that we're past that point. I would be curious to hear how the rest of the commission feels about that particular question, because that's what this meeting is for, is to get the whole commission input, as opposed to like just a stamp of approval on what the work group came up with. I do also, I like Attorney Doimus's example that was shared. It's a different format. I think our questions are similar. And it gives a little more like choice to it. So I just want to appreciate that. I thought that was a nice example to share.
Thank you, Lizzie. Yeah, and thank you, John. So any other feedback on this first section? Any other commissioner comments outside of the focus group? Rich?
Yeah, I'd just reiterate, I agree with what Rachel said, that it seems that we are way past that at this point to ask questions like that. I also would think that, like, I trust that the research committee did look at this and contract with a special agency to make sure that they weren't leading questions, and I trust that opinion. I also think that in terms of whether or not, like, I think we're trying to figure out much more about the structure and makeup of what the accountability should look like, more than a climate survey. I don't think that we're necessarily tasked with a climate survey. I think that we wouldn't be here today if we still were asking questions about whether or not we needed an accountability system for the police. So I think that it's kind of null and void at this point. I think that we need to go with what we're tasked with, which is to make an accountability system, and then ask those questions to the public about what they'd like to see. So I think that most of these questions are really well thought out, and I appreciate all the work that the subcommittee did to make this happen.
Thank you, Rich. Any other comments? Are we ready to move on to the next section? Okay. So we'll move on to the next couple of questions, 4 and 5. And I know Jordan added the feedback of adding question 3 to this section. Does the commission have any feedback on that? And we could take that to CCI. We have a meeting with CCI tomorrow and get their feedback about that as well. Jordan?
I'll say it's fine as is. Like, I trust what has been done, but I just thought it just seemed a little odd to have 2 SPPD questions and then go into what would be an oversight question. That's all.
Yeah.
Cami, would you mind scrolling up a little bit so we could see question 3? Okay.
So maybe what we'll do is we'll just bring that up with CCI tomorrow and get their feedback, since it's formatting. question. So for questions 4 and 5, are there any, is there any feedback from the commission or anyone? I'll hold for a second. All right, I'm not hearing any. So we'll move to the next section about complaints of alleged Santa Barbara Road police misconduct. And this is questions 7 and 8. Any feedback, Christian?
I guess I would just love to hear from Mr. Doimus on these specific questions that you think are leading, like how you would reword maybe just one of them to give the subcommittee an idea of like what you were getting at with what you were saying. So like for 7, for example, like how would you improve that? Do we not have John anymore?
John, are you there?
I am so sorry. I was having technical difficulties. I just was trying to get through. Can you repeat the question for me? I apologize, Commissioner Alonso.
Sure, no problem. I was just saying on 7 through 11, you'd kind of flag those as maybe being leading despite our best efforts and the consultants' work on this. And so I was just curious if you would take a look at number 7 and maybe make a suggestion on how to make that less leading.
Sure, and it's a very hard task. Like I said, I think the commission did an excellent job. I'm just trying to play as probably, like I said, again, outside my lane, but I want to strive to be helpful as a devil's advocate, right? So if you break it down, here's my analysis. Let's say you have a strong proponent. Let's say you have an attorney on their side who advocates against this, right? And they're saying, break it down the question: having an office that can both receive and monitor complaints about the alleged Santa Barbara Police Department misconduct and make public reports would increase my trust in the complaint process, right? The argument that if I'm plaintiff advocate would be, why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it not be beneficial? If I got a poll like that, I would say absolutely, I would agree, because the more the better, right? So does it really? My issue is that maybe leading is not the right word, and I truly apologize for that. Maybe the word is, does it really elicit the information that shows what the public need or what the public focus or the area of a commission should be in, right? You know, should it be auditor model style? Should it be investigatory? What powers? You know, I don't think anyone. I don't think you're going to have the majority of the public at least view that as a negative. And so I'm not saying, I'm not trying to discourage the question at all either. So I apologize for that too. I'm just saying a proponent could come back and say, anyone would answer in the affirmative, but what does that data tell us, right? And so that's what I think when the commission does a presentation or deals with the issue, with a question like that, they have to be able to explain, what does that data tell us? How does that address a community need based on the history of this police department operating in the community, right? That's all I'm suggesting when you have a question like that. So, I don't really want to interfere with too much. I just wanted to point that out with the structure. Sometimes maybe I regret when I do this. So, and I can be very frank with this commission. I feel very comfortable to do so. So, I apologize if I came across a certain way. I just wanted to point out, because I think all the questions are excellent, but I think 7-11 could at least, opponents could at least point out, well, you're not going to elicit negative responses the way it's structured. And I thought, looking around, I agree, we're way past that. There's some questions that Santa Ana has that I wouldn't address because you're past that because this committee and commission has been formed. But the way they have some certain structures, they give more of an options. So when you have, for example, I'm trying to think about one of them. I at least thought that they did a good job in dressing in terms of what qualities in there. I like how they focused more, instead of we're looking at this one issue of eligibility, what are the most important qualities that could have that too? But that's more semantics. You know, I don't see that question being really an issue. It's just when you look at 7-11, the questions are very positive, right? I don't think anyone's saying having oversight would increase transparency. If it had a oversight process, it would probably increase in trust, because people associate, and it's true historically, commission oversights do that. I think NACOL has stated in their research that, and at least what I've come across, the creation of these boards and creation of any oversight do increase trust in policing, do increase that. So, you know, my issue is someone may attack it and say, well, what really information are you getting at? I think no one's going to argue with you that they increase these qualities, right? They increase trust, they increase transparency. But how does it, you know, we've already established, I think the commission feels like, at least stating we're past that, we have a need for the oversight process, right? But what does that oversight process look like? That, and that's where I think at least more of the focus goes, right? Because 7-11 talk about, I think we're past that. But the flip side argument would be, maybe council does want to see the numbers. Maybe they do want to see how many people feel like they really need this, right? So, you know, the only way I guess I would, to answer your original question, the only way I would probably address that is, you know, what qualities are you looking for in oversight, or what, kind of reverse it, right? Instead of having strongly disagree, is it trust? Is it transparency? What are the most important qualities of an oversight, or what do you believe is needed to establish as a community an oversight should have? Should it be trust? Should it be transparency? Stuff like that. So it's just a minor comment. I probably made more out of it than I should have, and I apologize. I just wanted to point out, at least from an taking an analytical point of view, you know, there could be attacks on that portion, but you know, there probably isn't. I'm probably over hyper sensitive and hyper diligent on that, but I just wanted to point that out.
Super helpful. Thank you. It's actually very helpful.
Thank you. And what I'm gathering is that there might be a couple different perspectives on what the goal of this survey is. And Cami, you probably have a good perspective on the role that this survey is going to play, but also questions like this. I don't know if you have anything to add before we go to Rich and Rachel.
Yeah, I can add a couple quick things. I think that these questions, I think you'll be surprised. There are people who will read these and say, absolutely not, because they're an opponent of civilian oversight, and they're not going to agree with anything that, or any authority that you put out there. In surveys that I've seen like this before, people are going to use those questions to maybe indicate a little bit more than they would otherwise, that they just don't want any part of these different things, which then gives you some answers about how the community feels about the types of duties and authorities that you're asking for. And I also think it's important to talk about the Santa Ana survey a little bit. So just to kind of put it in context, Santa Ana is in a different part of their process than Santa Barbara is. They're just starting. They haven't had, you know, they don't have a large community commission like Santa Barbara does. It's much smaller. They haven't done their recommendations yet, and they are just in the part of moving towards getting the amount of training and information that this commission has had for months and months and months and months. And I think one of the most difficult parts of this survey is that you have very specific pieces of information that you need to help you as you finalize the document. But you also know that the majority of the community doesn't have access to the months and months and months of information and training that you've had on these topics. And so some of the questions have to be a little more simplified so that you can get some information out without throwing pages and pages of information at them. So I just a couple of things to consider.
Thank you for that, Cami. That's really helpful. Rich?
Yeah, so I just really disagree that this is a question that just everyone would answer in the positive on. I think if that were the case, then it probably would have been done already for the police department because everybody would have wanted that to begin with. And it's just not true. I think the police department it's a system that wasn't actually made for oversight in this matter. So if that's the case, and we're actually, if our job is to go and see what an accountability system looks like, I think anything that gives us feedback from the public of what would increase trust, I would imagine that even the police department would like to hear that their trust is going up if they do this accountability system in this way. So I just see this as not a duh question. I think it's really valuable information. And I know one way that I would hope that people would answer, but if that's not the case, then I would rather it not be, then our work shouldn't be valued and we shouldn't be doing it. So I think that this is, yeah, I think we're spending way too much time on going over these kinds of questions that I think actually give us a lot more insight than we may think. Thanks.
Thank you, Rich. And John, did you want to jump in?
I just wanted to add something. I appreciate, at least I was able to elicit this conversation. I appreciate what everyone has said in Cami, and you're right. I don't do these surveys, and so there are a lot of people that are against it. So I do take back kind of what I said. I think that maybe we do need those questions. So I definitely can appreciate that. So thank you for that. Actually, it really was helpful.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Rachel?
Yeah, I can be super brief because Cami, it was like Cami was reading from my notes that I had jotted down when I raised my hand earlier to make those 2 points. So all I would do to kind of repeat and reframe that for us as commissioners is, right, unlike Santa Ana, who's at a really different part in the process, like that's the question that I think we should be asking ourselves looking over these is that, are these questions going to give us the information we need at this point in our process to revisit the trickier sections for ourselves and then revise them, right? So, this section, regardless how you feel about it being leading in one way or another about trust in general, we're asking it because it's trust specifically in a complaint process, which is a part of this 19-page document that we want to revisit before we finalize our recommendations. Right? Like the straw votes that we've had about law enforcement participation on this oversight body, that is one that we repeatedly said we need to hear from the public about. So that's why there's a section, specifically about that. So, there's lots of different theories, I guess, of what surveys what kind of information they can get you. But we had that vision of what really we need, which is specific input on very specific parts of that recommendation.
Thank you, Rachel. Ken?
I have this question also for numbers 9 and 10. Was there any conversation about adding an option remain unchanged? Because you're asking about people's attitudes. I'm just wondering if people would say, whatever you do, I'm still going to have the same point of view.
That's a great point. Let's add that to our notes to pass along to Elise tomorrow. because I think you're right, neutral or unchanged isn't always an option where I think it could be.
Yeah. Although I understand leaving it out will give you more data, so yeah, more definitive data.
Thank you for that, Kim. Chief Malekian.
So I'm violating my own rule, which was to try to stay out of this process as much as possible. But I feel obligated to say very strongly what I have said all along, which is that the police department welcomes the oversight process. And so the issue is not whether or not we should have oversight. I happen to think that it would be of benefit to the department and to the community to have it. The discussion that we're having is what that oversight should look like and how to make it fit Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara Police Department and what that experience is. And without debating the question again, which I don't want to start right now anyway, about the issue about membership on the commission, I think that most people, we average, I think I sent the chair some data that show that roughly over the last 5 years, with the exception of 2020, we've averaged about 20 complaints per year. So 20, assuming that all those people were residents, that's a minimal number of complaints. So the chances of someone being very familiar with the internal affairs investigation process is pretty remote. So I'm not suggesting whether these questions are leading or not. I'm fine with them. I don't believe that it is going to be completely informative in terms of answering the question of what should oversight look like, in terms of asking the community. This commission has made its decision or made its recommendation about what that should look like. But we're asking the community to concur on that. And I'm not sure whether this very narrow focus on the complaint process that very few people are familiar with, I think may end up being somewhat problematic when it comes time to sell this to a larger audience. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Chief Malekian. Lizzie?
I appreciate that that comment about only a small fraction of the community may have gone through the complaint process. However, I think perhaps one of my questions is, are people even aware that a complaint process exists? And I think that question of that answer, that option of I don't know much about the process, I think would be telling. That tells us something. It gives us information. When I was doing the introduction presentations, one of the questions I would ask participants, and I would just ask them, thumbs up or thumbs down, if they were aware that a complaint process existed in Santa Barbara. And I would say 98% had no idea there was a process. So that tells the commission that simply making that more known, making that more accessible. So that gives us some information. So I appreciate that feedback about very few people going through the complaint process, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't know or they shouldn't know that a complaint process is available.
Thank you for that, Lizzie. Dama?
Yeah, but again, to add to that, though, it's just like the question is asking them if it's like a fair process. So again, like I just don't see how that's a useful question if there's not a wide knowledge of the process. I think we could use that to ask a question that could help answer whatever like we have many questions to figure out like whether they agree on the structure of the commission, like with the auditor monitor site, we can ask questions to better give insight into, whether or not there should be how the disciplinary process should be handled. Like there's a lot of issues that still need to be addressed. So I just think we could use that question for something more helpful, just my opinion.
Are there any other comments from other commissioners? Jordan?
I mean, and I with the most utmost respect, I know that during one of our calls talking about the feedback process and with the Santa Barbara Police Department, we identified that there was access issues to even figuring out how to, provide feedback to the Santa Barbara Police Department. So for me, I hear you, Chief Malakian, but I'm also just like, are those numbers accurate and representative? And I really lean towards, if we can get that data, if people don't know that there's this opportunity to give feedback, I think it'd be really, really important to know, and that will help our Civilian Oversight Board even more. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Jordan. Chief Malakian.
I just wanted to reiterate that I agree with the concern that Commissioner Rodriguez and Commissioner Killebrew raised. I think it's one of the driving reasons for having an oversight body, so that people have a place to go as an alternative to the police department to file their complaints. So I just want to be on record that is my position on that issue.
Thank you, Chief Malakian. Other comments? So Cam, if we could go back up to questions 7 and 8. Just want to make sure that we go through this section first and get a sense for if there's any feedback from the commission on this section before we move into questions 9 and 10 and 11. And again, this is for complaints of alleged Santa Barbara Police Department misconduct. All right, I'm not seeing any. Going once, twice. So we'll go to 9, 10, and 11, which is community involvement. Comments on this section? Questions, concerns? Not seeing any. We okay to move to the next one? Okay. Compensation for Civilian Oversight Board members, question 12 and 13. Any comments, questions, or concerns?
I wonder if people would not have an opinion. It's sort of either way. I just wonder if there are a lot of people who just are like, I trust the process, or I trust you all to figure out whether or not this is needed.
So adding maybe a 5th option that says no opinion. Yeah,
or something like that. I think it's worth the group just kind of talking about whether or not this group, but the group that's going to regroup, talking about whether or not that's something that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I agree, Kim. When you said that earlier, I wrote it down as something to flag for Elise to actually look at every single place throughout the survey where that might be a good option. Because I think, yeah, either neutral, would not change, or no opinion are probably things we should have in every section, just like at the beginning we had the I don't know much about whatever it is. So yeah. I think, yeah, the working group, we can take that to Elise and CCI tomorrow to just have her look at every question with that.
Thank you, Kim. Any other questions, concerns, or feedback on 12 or 13? All right, not seeing any. We are now in additional recommendations, which is question 14. The members of the Oversight Board should represent the diversity of the Santa Barbara community. 15, the Oversight Board should conduct regular community surveys related to public perceptions and understanding of police investigations and report those survey results to the community. 16, the Office of Police Oversight should be able to accept complaints of alleged SBPD misconduct directly and anonymously. And 17, individuals with previous law enforcement experience should be allowed to serve as the Director of Police Oversight. And again, these are agree, disagree, and unsure. Any feedback for us to take back to CCI tomorrow?
I actually do have a question about the very, very first one under general knowledge and perceptions, where it says, I believe the Santa Barbara Police Department is transparent about its existing internal investigation process. Would it be, I don't know, I'm thinking about this one because we have some other questions that say, instead of saying I believe, it just says the same, like, instead of saying like I believe something, could we say the Santa Barbara Police Department is transparent about its existing internal investigation process? And then you either agree, don't know. I guess I'm just wondering, like, why are we including I believe? Is that, I don't know. Because I think that might also, going back to what we were saying before, influence whether, I don't know how to say it, but I think it kind of makes it a little bit more complicated. Because if you believe it is, I don't know. I'm just thinking. Let me know if anybody else is thinking similarly, or if we should just leave it.
No, I think this is actually something that we did discuss. It's escaping me right now. Lizzie, Rachel, Cammie, do you remember what the discussion around I believe was in this question?
We didn't discuss believe, we discussed transparent, but I really like your point, Serafina, because that is not, that's such a, I don't know, it's a feeling word as opposed to a factual statement. So we could definitely bring that back to CCI and discuss that part. And because I think you're right, just simply saying the Santa Barbara Police Department is transparent about its blah, 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 and just take out the feelings. Odd for me to say that.
Thank you, Lizzie. All right, so the final section that we had mentioned, that was it. And aside from the demographic information, is there any other feedback that you would like us to take back to CCI for the final edits, Christian?
Yeah, number 22. Not a huge deal here, but it seems like we've conflated gender identity with sexual orientation, which are pretty distinctive categories. And so if we're asking, I know you can choose both, but they're pretty distinctive categories. So I was wondering why they're like lumped together in the same.
Yeah, that was actually intentional to conflate sex, gender, and sexuality, which is why we worded it just which of the following do you identify with, and folks can choose any and all the options. And actually, I don't know, Kim, I don't know if you were in the working group when we put this together, right? Why we kind of made some intentional demographic choices around these.
Yeah, because it basically gives people more options, because there's a lot of variety with how people identify across, I guess, both categories. So giving them a more expansive pool of options and not restricting it to gender identity or sexuality. I mean, and honestly, at the end of the day, we don't care. Like, it doesn't really matter for the data. I mean, as long as they check the ones that we want, that they identify with, we'll get the information we need. So we rather it be less restrictive.
Gotcha. I have a couple more questions, but they're not related to the wording. Can we take those at the end, do you think, Chair, or would you entertain now?
Now it's fine.
Okay, so you had mentioned that we'll be getting the survey results over time, like as they start to come in, which is really exciting. Who is going to be getting the results, and when will the full commission have access to those results as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. Rachel, did you?
Yeah, so we've talked with Elise about that. I think at this point we agreed at least weekly, because it's also based on her capacity. But that's actually, I mean, right, like that's something we can discuss, is how often we would like to get that. Because she can basically send us data disaggregated how we ask. She can kind of work with that, and she knows that we wanted to get that regularly in case we sort of, if she flagged something and said, hey, you've gotten 100 responses and every single one says they're from the Mesa, right? So that we can do targeted outreach as well. So it's kind of up to us maybe to also tell her, like, how often would we think is useful to get that data in advance of the actual sort of summary analysis memo that she'll do. Because it's really, the initial thought was that how frequently do we need to see it in order to do more outreach if we feel like the survey is not really getting the kind of breadth that we would like to see.
Thank you, Rachel. Lizzie?
So the Google form itself does all, it counts it. So it kind of does that work for us. The part that's going to be most time consuming is the manual surveys. So the paper surveys that have to then be data entry into a spreadsheet of some sort. So that part is going to take longer, and even just the, administering it, collecting it, the forms, submitting it to someone who's going to do the data entry. Those logistics are going to take much longer than simply somebody filling out the Google Doc. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Google Doc process, but that data is like, it just gives you a number of how many people responded in a certain way.
It's actually just a quick point of clarification. It's not Google Forms though. They're using SurveyMonkey. So it's going to be a different platform, but yes, it will have the very same analytics. And actually that's a good point. I was thinking about this today, and I think we could probably go over it tomorrow in the working group, but actually having like kind of like a fact sheet on the survey, like a little FAQ, like that, like what is the platform? How are we going to be able to send it out? Because we're going to have a couple different options of QR codes. CCI has a lot of, obviously the parameters around how to make sure folks aren't filling out the survey multiple times, things like that, that I think it'd be really useful for the whole commission to know the answers to. At our meeting, at our council presentation yesterday, one of the public comments was around kind of the rigor of the data and confidence in the scientific, analysis and method. And that's actually something Elise at CCI gave us some language about a few months ago, because we were sort of anticipating that. So I also have some language around what to say to folks if they ask that. And basically it's, something akin to, because of the exploratory nature of the work that we're doing, None of this is going to use random sampling or rise to the level of data rigor of a scientific study. So if folks feel like that's useful, we could put together a little FAQ fact sheet kind of about the process of the study as well.
Yeah, I think that would be great. But also, who's getting the data? That was my question. It's the subcommittee.
Yeah, likely.
We haven't really. I guess we hadn't decided that, but that was the idea, I guess.
But
okay.
I
just want to know who I have to bug to get the results.
Well, let me jump in. So I don't know that it's appropriate that we get the actual answers to the questions ahead of time before the survey is done, but we could get number of responses and demographic information that will help us know whether or not we need to do outreach, and then wait for CCI to send us the analysis at the end. So to get the demographic information and number of responses, you can bother myself, Rachel, Louisa, but I'll volunteer myself. You can bother me. Jordan?
Well, it's on the record, Chair, so. And then, so SurveyMonkey, that was my second question on how the survey will be delivered. It's SurveyMonkey. Okay.
And it'll be available via paper forms as well. And Jordan?
Thank you. Again, I just want to say thank you again to this subcommittee for all the work. I know there are several meetings and also selecting a consultant and just all the work that's gone into this. I really appreciate it. A couple questions that I do have are just, Rachel, you mentioned inputting paper surveys. Is that something that, who is doing that input of data, gathering all of them and inputting it? And then I have a follow-up question just about how we are disseminating this information. Will there be a press release? And if possible, can we include that frequently asked questions piece to the press release that goes out to the community?
I mean, I don't know if I'm able to. I want to say yes to all of that, right? I mean, I think even at council yesterday, I mean, council members themselves were asking, like, how can we help? When can we send this out? So yes, I think, again, it's kind of up to us to think through the dissemination and ask city staff for support in all the ways possible to do that. I think along with like the focus group, recruitment, things like that, this is why we're excited to have such a, such breadth and depth represented on the commission, that we need to really leverage our networks, because this is also something, the other reason it isn't going to sort of rise to the level of thousands and thousands of responses and scientific rigor is that we have, a few weeks to get this done. So I think if it's appropriate, I'll leave that to Gabe to say if it's appropriate, press release, like how we'll work with the city to do that. But we all also will have the links, the bit.ly's, QR codes, all those sorts of different mechanisms to share out as well. And I've already forgotten the first part of your question because I was so excited about dissemination.
Inputting the paper surveys.
Oh, the paper surveys. I think that we're still having that conversation, Gabe. Is that right? Because we also need to hear from folks in the community about where we want to make paper surveys available, right? Because they also need to be collected in a way that's secure and then input by someone who is, not part of the commission, not, biased, things like that. Like, obviously we want to protect the integrity of the data. So that's conversations we're having with CCI as the consultants to guide us in that, and then city staff.
Thank you. And maybe one suggestion, I don't know if we can solicit the library in any way, or libraries, but that could be a neutral place for that. Just one suggestion.
Thank you, Jordan. Yeah, I'll work with, well, maybe the whole focus group. We'll work with Sam and city staff to try and figure out what the best process is. Serafina?
Yeah, thank you. I also wanted to just say thank you to this focus group. You guys have done so much work, and the survey is awesome. So thank you all for your hard work. I also did have a question. I just wanted to know where we are with like language translations of the survey, both paper and digital. So if you have any information on that.
Yep, right after this meeting, we're gonna send Sam all of the documents that we need translated, and we're gonna try and get them turned around as quickly as possible. And they'll be available in both digital and paper.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Serafina. Lizzie?
So as we move forward to the next steps of encouraging folks to look at the recommendations and complete the survey, is there going to be similar to like the introduction PowerPoint, is there going to be like a script that we use to say, this is what we came up with, we want your participation, if you have questions, just wondering if it's, we're just going to reach out to our networks and our social media, or if we're going to use a scripted format.
A good question. I know Rachel drafted an email that we have been using to send out to people for the focus groups, and we're going to share that with the full commission after this meeting, so that you too can share it with your networks so that we can get the word out. And there is a portion of that email that focuses on the survey. And I think we could use that language both on social media and in emails. Rachel, did you
yeah, absolutely. Like, so we've drafted, we because the focus groups are happening next week, and that needs to happen first. So there's we've drafted some language just to explain what the focus groups are, why we need, folks' help linking to the sign up form. So as Gabe said, that will be shared with the whole commission really soon. And I can also share with folks like what my idea with how to use that is, that I'm writing to people in my network with like a little personal like intro and just saying, please read the letter below. And the letter below is that standard language, because I think it will be really helpful if all of us use some standard boilerplate. And that ends with just sort of, commissioner name on behalf of the Community Formation Commission. But obviously we want people to make personal connection with their network. So we can share, I think, Gabe, if you want, like when you're ready to share that language with everyone, I can also share like an example of, an added paragraph or something that I'll use.
That'd be great. Awesome. Kim?
Hi, just on that last note, are we going to try to be coordinated in like our outreach to the community, or is it really just going to be like, if maybe a group is going to get an email twice from commissioners because they have a relationship with them, and that's okay. Just want to know if we're thinking through to make sure that we cover everyone. And then the second question was about the open box where people can just write whatever they want. Is the consultant going to aggregate or summarize that in any way, or are we just going to kind of get all that?
They're going to deliver a summary memo with all of the key points from both the open box and then also the focus groups. And Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. So the same reason, so there are note takers that will take notes in the focus groups with the NACOL facilitators, and that open text box, all of that will get submitted to CCI, and then part of their contract for what they're providing us with is basically pulling out themes and kind of aggregate qualitative data. So we certainly will have access to the raw data, but we probably don't want it, right? Like what we really want from them is sort of the summary of the themes that are pulled out of those qualitative sections. And that is, as what Elise has said, that is actually what the majority of her time and their time will be focused on in the last few weeks of their contract, because the qualitative just takes longer. So yes, so we should get summary memos of those themes, along with, if there are really relevant direct quotes or something, that's kind of they'll pull that out as necessary, I think. And I think, sorry, to your first question as well, I wanted to say again, right, I mean, I do think a broad press release, I think, I believe, right, the Independent and other news organizations have already offered, like they're going to put it out there. So I do think we're all going to use our networks, and we are going to have very official blanket community announcements about this, and also things on our website, so that, yes, our networks are vast, but they definitely have limits. So there will be, lots of kind of broad public outreach too.
Great.
Jordan.
Thank you again. I just really appreciate this commission for all the questions and just being so thorough. My next question is just looking at timeline, as was indicated in Rachel's response of like, we have a certain amount of time with our consultants that are doing the survey. So just wanted to have just a quick refresher of what that timeline looks like. And so that we can then prepare to help disseminate all this information. Yeah. And get to work. Continue to work. Sorry, not get to work, continue to work.
So in terms of timeline, we are hoping to finish the survey as soon as possible and have it ready to go out, hopefully by early next week. We're going to conduct the focus groups next week. And then it's going to take a couple of weeks to be able to distill all of that information down to the memo. So we're looking at, I imagine we'll get the memo middle of March, and that'll give us an opportunity to review that then and have the discussion on, with that information, do we want to make changes, and what changes do we want to make to the recommendation before taking it to City Council in April. From our presentation yesterday, we asked for an extension to the end of April, so we do have some time to really have those discussions and make changes to the recommendation.
Thank you. That's also good to know.
He just snuck that in there, right? Oh, by the way. I just want to say, in terms of the timeline as well, like just so, everyone is clear. I think, what we really need from the whole commission in the next 3 to 5 days is pushing out the focus group sign up, right? Like that's the letter that Gabe will send out ASAP, and right, because those are the end of next week and we really need to fill them. And then concurrently, the survey will get finalized and translated, because I think that's also the piece that is going to take staff time, right? So we can't just instantly send it out as soon as it's ready. So it's almost like we'll kind of tackle the focus groups, and then right around that time, or even after the focus groups, launch the full community survey.
Thank you for all these questions. Any other questions or feedback that you would like us to take back to CCI? All right, I'm not seeing any. I know we said this would be an hour, but this is a really good conversation.
We just
if
like
you, what's that?
We like each other a lot.
Yes, we do. We'll be in person one of these days. If you do, after reflection or after looking over the document again, have any feedback, please send it to us. We'd be more than happy to bring it to CCI for further discussion. And the second that everything is ready to go, we'll send it out to you all. Tonight, I'm going to work on sending you out the information for the focus groups along with kind of an email template and more information. Sam, if we can open up public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you, Chair. If there's anyone in the public that would like to speak on the review of the outreach materials, item 5, please raise your hand. If there's anyone in the public that would like to speak on item 5, review of outreach materials, please click on the hand raise feature. There are no hands raised, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. And unless anyone has additional comments, we will close out this item and we will move to future business. And future business is next week's meeting will be canceled, so we'll get a little bit of time off. And we have the focus groups next week. So our facilitators and note takers are going to be hard at work. We'll actually have Cami in town next week, so maybe we'll get to say hi in person. But yeah, the biggest thing is that we get the word out about the focus groups, and I'll send all of that information tonight. But I'm also going to send a list of each stakeholder category, and under there are the groups that we identified under each of those categories. If you know someone personally from one of those organizations or groups, please help us reach out to those stakeholders to try and get them to sign up for the focus groups. That is the top priority. Does anyone have any additional information for future business?
Yes, I have one for the focus group. We just started back on campus at Santa Barbara College of Law on Monday. So I'll have an update for you. I'm supposed to meet with the dean tomorrow. And then I'm asking one of our professors, Judge Hill, to possibly speak to get more students to come because he's very popular. And also he's got a lot of perspective on issues like this. So hopefully that'll get more engagement and people to come. But I'll hopefully have a date soon and I'll let you guys know. And if anyone else is interested, just email me if you want to. I'll help out with just like facilitating it.
Perfect. Thank you, Dama. Any other future business items? All right. Not going to keep you all any longer than we need to. We will adjourn this meeting at 7:21. Thank you all. Enjoy the break. Appreciate you all.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.